find the angle. Victory desperate. David Carney! It's in now! It's in off Ryan Grant's all square in the grand final. Incredible drama, and it's the right fullback who squared the ledger.
Fabulous desperation from Victory. They just couldn't get it away. Does it go in on the first instance? We can't really tell. It's close enough. But Ryan Grant makes no mistake. From Canowindra to the Big Apple, he etches his name in A-League history. Ryan Grant gets the home team level.
Thanks, Ryan, for joining us at the Regional Football Hub. We certainly appreciate you taking time out of your day to have a chat to us about your journey as a regional football player. First and foremost, how's isolation going for you, and how's you handling the current suspension of football?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, so far I think I'm a bit like everyone else, getting a bit antsy and a bit impatient, but it's obviously all for the right reasons, so can't complain too much. But yeah, pretty keen to get out and run around and play footy again. Beautiful.
Are you doing much in by yourself, fitness-wise? I mean, I assume you'd probably be following some sort of a program from the club in what you need to do until it's the right time to be able to come back and train as a group.
Yeah, we've been given programs from home. It's a bit tougher when you have to sort of do it by yourself. The motivation levels aren't always the strongest, but I think it's been long enough now of doing nothing for me anyway to really push myself and get going again, because you never know when the season will start again if it does. So you've got to try and be ready as much as you can. But yeah, doing a little bit of fitness and meeting up with a few mates that have become coaches and stuff that have sort of put me through my paces, which has been nice.
Okay. Yeah, cool. All right, I'm just going to share some photos here.
Oh, yeah.
So some photos of you back in the day.
All right.
So my first question is, what was the go with that little beanie you had? Was that pre-mullet days where you're hiding the big locks of hair that you had, that when you were running around and playing used to frustrate me no end because you'd be flicking your hair all the time when you were running around?
Yeah, I used to have a bit of a mop. I've always had pretty ordinary haircuts, and that was no different back then. So I had that. Yeah, that was a trip to England that we did. So I had to have a bit of a beanie and trying to be a little bit different like I do, and sort of had to get something a bit strange. So I was, trying to wear that to keep warm, but also to make a bit of a fashion statement, which looking back wasn't probably the right choice.
Look good, you're a trendsetter, mate, trendsetter. What memories do you have from when you were back playing in Western? Obviously, you moved to Canowindra and then Bathurst and played for Churches United before you went to Western New South Wales as such. What memories do you have of that period of time when you were playing in a regional area?
Yeah, obviously very fond memories. Playing out in the country is a little bit different. You're sort of very close knit with your teammates. I know it's probably the same up here or wherever you play, but out there is a little bit more community to it. Growing up in Canowindra, we used to have to play in the Cowra comp because Canowindra obviously wasn't big enough, so we'd travel across to Cowra, which was always fun and made a good rivalry. And then moving to Bathurst from there, I think I was about 11 or 12. Didn't really know too much about the club, so spent a year with, I think, Churches, just playing locally, and then jumped into Bathurst 75 at the time. That was playing in I think it was Super Youth, it was called back then. And travelling to Sydney every 2 weeks to play up here in this comp. So, looking back, it was great times, and you make some good mates, and I suppose when you travel together, you sort of get lifts, and everyone sort of helps out when they can, and it sort of brings everyone together. So it was a really good time looking back, and still got mates now that played with back then, and still keep in contact. So yeah, it's a great part, and wouldn't change anything, I don't think.
Excellent. I mean, back when you played, especially in my team, you played behind James Christie at number 10, but I'd say you were probably a very adventurous number 10. How's the transition from then, obviously when you were playing in midfield and attacking role, to now when you're a rampaging right back, let's say? How did that transition happen? When did it happen, and how did you cope with that when it did happen?
Yeah, I don't think I've changed too much. I still run around like a headless chook, but yeah, the sort of the transition occurred originally when I was at the AIS as a midfielder, but then joined Sydney FC youth team, and obviously I was a bit younger compared to a lot of them, so there was a lot of good players running around, and the midfield was quite strong. So they needed someone to play right back, and having a bit of a fitness base, I suppose. One of my strengths is my fitness, so they sort of gave me a chance there and played there. I didn't want to play there at all. I wasn't happy about it. You always think that right backs, there's always people that get shifted. You're either not a good enough centre half or not a good midfielder. So didn't really want to play out there, but yes, had to play out there, and then obviously did quite well and got into the first team that way. So yeah, sort of knuckled down and gave that a good shot. And then over the years went back to midfield and then other positions. But I think my traits and my strengths are best suited to right back. And when I realised that, I really gave it a red hot crack, and then obviously it's done quite well for me.
Yeah, certainly. First player to play 10 years at Sydney FC means that you've done quite well from where you started, and I guess your transition to play right back meant you were able to be a professional football player and play for Australia. Was that something at the time that you thought about? I need to be a right back because this is what I want to do for my career.
Not particularly. Like I said at the start, I wasn't real happy about it, but then I sort of adjusted to it and saw it as a sort of a good position for me. It wasn't. I remember my agent at the time saying, I think Chelsea had just signed Basingwa for big money, and he was saying that right back is becoming more of an important role, and people don't look at it as it's sort of like we'll just put someone there for the time being. It's sort of more of a integral part in any team now. So he was trying to convince me. I still wasn't convinced. But then when I realised that I could do well there, I really knuckled down and started to enjoy it. As you know, I love trying to attack, and the modern day sort of fullback, you can try and get forward as much as possible, which sort of suited what I wanted to do. And never thought that I'd kick on and play for the Socceroos when I started playing there or anything, but it was more just this is where I can fit into a team and play regularly and play week in, week out. And sort of just concentrate on that, and then the rest sort of came from there.
What was the hardest challenge you had? I guess one as a regional player, but then two, when you relocated to Sydney, what was the hardest challenges that you faced from those two situations?
You sort of when I was playing out in Bathurst, I was sort of, without blowing smoke up my own bum, I was obviously one of the better ones, and you think you're quite good and you're doing quite well. And then when I got asked to move to Sydney for the New South Wales Institute of Sport, that in itself was hard transitioning. But on the football pitch, I was nowhere near the best, and sort of struggled to find my feet for a good couple months there. But then the person I am, I suppose, and obviously coming from a country, you sort of never give up, and that's what we're best at. So I sort of stuck at it and started to do really well, and sort of pushed on from there. But the moving itself to Sydney was a big challenge, moving away from not only your friends, but most importantly your family. It was tough, and I was 15 at the time, and catching public transport at all sorts of times. It was kind of scary and a bit of a transition, but like I said, I stuck it out, and it sort of worked out on the pitch and worked out off the pitch. And I don't think I could move back home now. No disrespect, but I don't think I could move back home now after sort of living up here and getting used to it. I think I've lived in Sydney longer than I've lived anywhere, so it is what it is. But definitely was very tough initially when I moved up, purely just being away from family. But on the pitch, I was not used to not being the better player, and then sort of got used to that and started to do well, and then sort of pushed on from there.
I guess we talk a lot about the challenges of being a regional footballer. Do you find any benefits from coming from a regional area?
I think I always speak highly of the sort of competitors we are. I know Australians themselves are known as being never give up and very competitive, but I think even more so from the bush where it's maybe considered sort of working class, you sort of never give up and you try your best till the end. And I think, as people know, can be a bit fiery, a bit feisty, and sort of are known to never give up, I suppose. And I think that's definitely been brought up with, not only from my family, but being from where I'm from and where I originated from, I suppose. So I think, yeah, definitely learning your trade out in the bush and getting used to always trying hard and never giving up, and that sort of put me in good stead when I moved to Sydney and sort of tried to make a career of football.
When you moved, in terms of going from Bathurst to when you went to Sydney for NSWIS initially, did you seek advice from anyone, ex-players? I mean, I know Nathan Burns kind of followed the path that you followed before you. Was him or his family someone you reached out to, or were there others that helped you in deciding, one, that's what you want to do, and then how to best sort of manage that?
Yeah, so initially I just said yes to the NSWIS coach without really thinking it through and wanted to do it. But then after that, I obviously spoke to Burnsy. As family knows, we're very good family friends with the Burnses, and Ray and Denise, my parents spoke to them. I spoke to Nath, and then obviously Nathan Sherlock had done it just the year previously. So I spoke to him and sort of seen what it was about and asked a few questions. But more than anything, I just sort of accepted it and did it before really thinking it through. And then it sort of just all happened quite quickly. And then once I was there, I sort of had to take a step back and think, oh, wow, what have I done? But then obviously it worked out quite well. And but yeah, definitely did speak to some other boys that had done it. And then Nathan obviously went on to the AIS, and I got to speak to him about that too. So I was quite lucky where a few players had done it in the previous years, which I could sort of get some advice and learn some little tips and things.
Yeah, great. Excellent.
So we speak about, I suppose, football being one game, but there's so many different levels in a sense, and you've come through them all, through grassroots and then NPL years into an A-League environment and into a national environment. What do you think the main differences are? I know you said sort of when you're in a regional area, you were sort of above the others, and then you move into a sort of national environment and things, and you're finding your feet. What do you think are the main differences in all those levels of football?
I think the obvious answer is just the professionalism. I mean, everyone when they're a kid, they always just rock up with their shin pads and boots on, and it's all fun and games, I suppose. But then as you go through it, you sort of have to learn your spot firstly and know where you stand, I suppose. But then obviously the more professional it gets, the more strict and whatnot. So I think overall, looking at it, the professionalism changes from level, which is the obvious answer. But the things that don't change, I don't think, is getting along with players and being friends and the camaraderie. I think the culture is massive. And like I was saying before, out in the bush, you sort of get really good, make really good friends and get really close with the players. And not only that, but their parents. And as I said, that you sort of get lifts everywhere and everyone's helping out where they can. And then as that goes on, the culture sort of doesn't really change. Although the parents aren't involved, you sort of become really good mates. And if you have a strong culture, I think it goes a long way to having a good team and then being successful. So, I think the professionalism changes, but everything on the pitch and what you try and do as a team and culture doesn't really change too much.
Yep. And then obviously you've gone through all the levels. How did it feel to finally break into the national camp to start with, to sort of get in there, have a bit of a run around a national environment, and then compare that to finally getting your first cap to be able to go out and actually play with the Australian badge on your chest?
Yeah, it's obviously a massive honour, and it's always very cliche how I say it, but it obviously was a dream come true playing football your whole life. You want to represent your country. I mean, I played a lot of sports and always just wanted to play for my country, no matter what it was, but to sort of pursue football and put so much time and effort into that, to be able to, get to play for your country and represent Australia was awesome. As you said, I sort of got called up a couple of years before my debut and sat on the bench for a few games, and then, then got injured not long after, so I didn't get to make any more make an appearance or make any more squads or camps. And then a couple of years down the track from that, I was back from injury and was lucky enough to get the call up and make my debut. So it was very exciting. I didn't think I'd get that chance again, but then I was lucky enough, and yeah, just being part of the setup is unreal. But be able to step on the field and say you've got that one cap for Australia, and I suppose at any one time you're one of the best 11 players in Australia at the time, I suppose. So when people tell you that and you look at it from that sort of point of view, it's really cool. But when it happens, you sort of just, it's like a progression. You're obviously stoked, but then you just have to get on with it and do your best and try and stay there as long as possible. So it's a mixture of emotions and different feelings and whatnot. But yeah, it's a big honour and something I'm really, really happy happened.
Great.
That's awesome. And I suppose credit to yourself as well. You sort of got a taste of it and then it all sort of fell apart, and then to go back into it. Does anything change, I suppose, now? You know, a spot's never secured in a national team, but now that you've sort of been in the environment a little bit of a longer and you've sort of got a bit of consistency in that environment, does anything change?
Not really. I think to represent your country is obviously the highest honour, so you're always going to do your best or do your best to stay a part of that. If anything, it gives you a little bit of confidence in yourself, and that's something I think I've always sort of lacked. I don't think I always thought I was the best. I always sort of saw myself as just trying as hard as I could, and if that could get me so far, then that was great. But yeah, sort of representing your country and being able to, I've played a handful of games now, being able to sort of be consistent in that for at least the last 18 months has sort of made me a little bit more confident in myself, and made me back myself when I got that chance, rather than sort of going into my shell and being a little bit scared. It was more, now I'm happy to be there and get along with everyone. So I got that little bit of confidence in myself to sort of kick on and give it a good crack. But training wise, nothing changes. You sort of just, you try, if anything, maintain a higher standard, and you sort of try and bring it back to clubland and do it on a regular basis on the field. And then even in training, you're trying to lift the standard and keep it as high as possible to give you every chance of staying among the camp and the squad.
What's the point where you think in your head, I've made it now? Is it when you signed your first contract, when you played your first A-League game, when you first call up to Socceroos, or the first game in the Socceroos? What was the point in your head that you think, you know, I've made it, I'm on the path and I'm where I want to be?
I think all of those things you mentioned, once you do them, you're like, oh yeah, here we go. And then you soon see that there's obviously another step to go and you want to be better. So when you sign your first professional contract, I was pumped. I think I went and bought a PlayStation at the time. I thought, here we go, I've got a bit of cash, I can go spend some stuff. And then after that, you want to play your first game. So you play your first game, you think that's all la-di-da, but then you sort of just keep setting different goals and different benchmarks where you want to reach. But you never fully think you've made it. Like, even today, I'm always questioning my own ability or if I'm good enough or whatnot. And it only takes one good game to sort of change that mind frame, but then it only takes one bad game to sort of go back into it. So you never really think you've made it. You sort of compete. Like now that I'm lucky enough to play for Australia, you play against some big nations. You think, yeah, I'm nowhere near them. So you still know that you haven't quite made it, but yeah, you're still quite comfortable in what I've achieved, and it's been great. But yeah, you always want to push further and see what you can do.
I mean, you had some challenges. You did your ACL twice. How do you get through that mentally? I mean, beyond the disappointment, what becomes the driver to get back, and how do you handle it, you know, in a mental sort of way, in terms of handling disappointment and, you know, getting motivated to get back to where you were?
Yeah, that was both very tough times. Both times didn't come at the best. It depends which way you look at it. I always thought it was the worst timing. The first one, I just was player's player for Sydney FC that year and thought I was doing well. And then the following season, I think round 3, did my knee. So you can sort of look at it like I was doing so well, I could have pushed on, and then this setback, but you could have easily been not doing well. And then if it happened that time, you could sort of lose a contract or not re-sign, I suppose. And then the second time, like I just mentioned, just won a grand final, had been called up for the Socceroos, didn't play, but had been called up, and then went and did my knee. So both times wasn't the best timing or was great timing, depends which way you look at it. But yeah, the big pusher for me, and I'm quite lucky, or any professional's quite lucky, that I still had to go to training every day, so I had to do something anyway. So I sort of approached it. I have to be here. I only have to be here for 3 or 4 hours. Let's just knuckle down and get this done as soon as possible, and then I can get out and then take my mind off it, because the last thing you want to do is overthink it. You see your mates running around playing footy, you being successful, especially at the time in Sydney. Sydney was being quite successful, and I was missing out on it. It was great to be a part of, and the club and the coaching staff really wanted me to feel a part of it, which I did. But at the same time, you see them doing well, and you're sort of sitting in the stands. It was tough, but yeah, the biggest motivation was for me was just, I have to do this anyway, regardless. So let's just get stuck into it, get it done, and then get back as soon as possible, so I can be part of the success again. And then, lucky enough for me, that sort of happened on both occasions, even though there were a few hiccups here and there. I was out for a pretty extended period, especially the first one. I think it was 14 months, just from pushing it too quickly to come back. I had a little slight hiccup and set me back a few months, so that wasn't great. But yeah, once you're back, you realise how much you missed it, and you don't really want to take it for granted again. So I think those things were the biggest indicators for me to get back into it and get back to where I was.
I think Fernley has some photos to go through just before I ask my next question.
Yep.
There we go. So there's the 2 games you've played against Manchester United and Liverpool. What memories do you have from those games?
The A-League All-Stars one was really cool, because you're sort of selected from, I think, the public, or even the coach has an in-say, as I say, sorry. So I'm not sure if it was the coach that picked me or just the public on voting. So that was just cool to be sort of recognised, to be part of it. And obviously at the time, Manchester United were a huge club. I know they still are, but back then they were even bigger. So it was really cool to be able to play against them and sort of test yourself. The Liverpool game is a funny one, because they literally arrived that morning after being on a flight for close to 20 hours, I think it is, from the UK. So they arrived that morning, played us that night, and pulled our pants down. They were unbelievable. And I just remember thinking, if they can play like that after a 20-hour flight, I do not want to play them when they're feeling 100%. But yeah, just the sharpness was the biggest difference that I sort of took out of it. Firmino, to be fair, I am a bit of a Liverpool fan, but I didn't know a lot about him. Obviously liked him, but just seeing him in person and live, and how sharp and quick he was. And again, like I said, coming off a flight that day, and to be able to do what he was doing was pretty freakish, and to see that in person was really cool. So yeah, they were obviously great experiences. I've played against PSG also, and Chelsea and Tottenham, which all of them are exactly the same. I think a lot of Australian players can match it, but the biggest thing is how sharp they are and how quick they think, I think, is the biggest difference. And that's definitely what I saw and tried to learn from.
Cool. I just got your FIFA cards here, so I don't know if you can see that.
Yep.
So my question is, what did you do between 2019 and 2020 to get your pace up?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's I've always been a bit not real happy with the pace. I think I'm a little bit quicker than that, to be honest. A few boys in the team have got better stats than me. I'm not real happy about it, but yeah, I'm not sure. There must have been 1 or 2 clips that the FIFA rating people saw that I sort of put the burners on, and they sort of took that in. But by the looks of it, I got a better tan too. That first photo, I looked a bit white and pasty. That second one, I'm looking quite brown. So yeah, they're both ordinary photos though. But anyway.
When you play FIFA, do you play FIFA much?
Not a lot. I've played a little bit more now that I've been in lockdown and stuff. So I've sort of got into it a little bit, but I only sort of occasionally play just for money with some mates. But other than that, not a lot.
Do you push Steve Coker aside and then put yourself into the 10 on the 9?
I do put myself high up the pitch just to try and score a few more goals. But yeah, once I soon see how my shooting rating is, I sort of push myself back.
Fair enough.
Just got another question, Ryan. So obviously you had success at A-League level as well. And I'd say from previous interviews, you're someone who thrives off sort of added pressure from a situation or the crowd as well. And I remember after the grand final last year, you're saying that you probably wouldn't have taken a penalty if it wasn't for the crowd booing, etc. How do you explain that? Are you someone who thrives for that added pressure in games, or?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that was a little bit different. I probably wouldn't say I'm the biggest pressure player, under pressure player, but that one was a little bit different because that was a very personal. Every time I touched the ball, they were booing me, and it was very noticeable. I think everyone could hear it. There was, I think, 60,000 people there, and majority were obviously Perth fans. So, yeah, that was a bit difficult, but yeah, that I just wanted to get one over them. They were obviously booing, like I said, and I just had sort of wanted to have that last laugh. So when it came to penalties and the coach was asking who's keen, I definitely put my hand up and said, yeah, I just want to get one over these fellas. And lucky enough, I scored it, even though Rocket got a – yeah, I did. It was a not bad pen, but Rocket got a hand to it, but lucky enough, it went in the back of the net, so can't complain.
What did you say to Jason Davidson to upset him so much?
He was in my ear more than anything, and then it just makes me look like I was sort of getting stuck into him. They didn't show much of him mouthing off to me, but yeah, it was just friendly banter like it always is, and then in the end I sort of got the last laugh. But there's just a lot of funny memes came out after it with my mullet of Joe Dirt, and then his blonde hair was Eminem. So it was a good laugh, and I think everyone got a lot of people interested, I suppose. And if I have to be the bad guy for that, then fair enough. But yeah, it was just a good occasion.
Best players that you've played with, and which players have you learnt the most from being around?
Yeah, good question. I think obviously you can't go past Del Piero. Played with him. He was a freak. Goes without saying. Just seeing him on a personal level there, in day out, he was a joke. Obviously played with Tim Cahill. I've played with John Aloisi. These are sort of the bigger names, but then players that you sort of aren't as recognisable, I suppose, or people don't really see the best of, I suppose, or think the best of, like people like Broski. I think just what he could do, even before he came back the first time he was at Sydney, he was a freak and always thought that. Then when he came back, he became the captain and the sort of leader he was. He's not the bloke to sort of stand up and say, let's do this, let's do that, let's motivate. It was more, he was just a good mate, and you just saw what he gave on the pitch. And it really drove you, and yeah, become really good mates with him, and see him do really well. That was awesome. So I think I learned a lot from him, just as a person around the environment and what he can sort of do for a team without being that motivational fella. Who else? It's sort of hard. Like even Minko is a freak. The stuff he does, I don't think goes as I think people don't really realise just what he does. On the ball, he's obviously freak, but he's in the top two distance covered every game, without doubt. So I think just the things that he does off the ball for the team is freakish. So I know there's a lot more. I can't think of them off the top of my head. It's hard when you've been at the same club for 11 years. But yeah, I'm sure I'm missing a few players, but there's some big names. But I think, yeah, knowing that what I learned off Broski and even off Minko, so he can be the best player and be a marquee, but still work as hard as anyone else. I think they're the biggest things.
I mean, we're all guilty of this, and particularly me. I mean, we look at the best players, and they're normally attackers. I mean, is there defenders that you look at to model off, or defenders that you look at that you've played with to think, I want to be a little bit like them, or things that they do that inspire you as well as a player?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit like everyone else. You sort of watch the fancy players that score the goals or set them up. But I think players that I've played with, obviously Wilco, is just so consistent. and then you're sort of very professional. So you sort of learn subconsciously, I think, from these players. When you're in an environment like we are at Sydney at the moment, it's not really people barking orders or telling you how you should be or act or whatnot. It's more everyone's sort of doing it because they want the best for themselves, but want the best for the teams, and you sort of just learn from that and adapt to that. So you almost become more professional off the park just from being around people like Wilco and etc. So even other players like back in the day, Simon Colosimo, played with him. I was just learning my trade as a right back, and he was playing centre half. So I learned a lot off him as a defender. But other than that, I think the modern day people, they're both younger than me, so it's a bit awkward. But I think the two Liverpool fullbacks are the perfect modern day footballers, or fullbacks, I should say. So, sort of watching them, I'm a big visual learner. So if I watch them and see what they do, I think it makes a big difference for me. And they're obviously top of assist or whatever as defenders. So, they're big players that I like to watch a lot.
How about growing up, Ryan? Were there players that you tried to model your game off or something like that?
Again, I was a more of a midfielder, attacking player, so I loved Harry Kewell. I loved Viduka, sort of those sort of players that you want to be like, because you can relate to them as Australians, and obviously they're the biggest names at the time. But as I got older, you sort of watch players, and I know Gerrard's another freak, but I love to watch him and see what he could do. Sort of the generic big names I used to love, but then you sort of play with people on a personal level, and you sort of try and learn from them. But again, like I mentioned, Burnsy, looked up to him and saw what he did and tried to learn from that. But other than that, I think I'm like most other Australians and just love the big name Aussies.
Was there any influential sort of people when you were younger that helped, I guess, guide you for your journey? I mean, obviously your mum and dad were quite supportive of you, and obviously, your dad helped out a lot with travelling to NSWIS when you first started. But were there any other influential people going from either being in a youth regional player or when you made that transition to go to Sydney?
Obviously you mentioned my parents. I think they were massive, and they're obviously massive for everyone. Your parents sort of do everything for you, and mine were no different. And they were definitely the biggest drivers for me. But obviously yourself, Andrew. I had a few different coaches in the country, and I think they were all very good. I think we're quite lucky, or at the time we're quite lucky to sort of have the caliber of coaches we had out in the bush, sort of teaching us that it wasn't just sort of country football where you just run as hard as you could or run as long as you could. It was more we tried to learn, or you guys sort of tried to teach us technical side, which was massive, and tactics also. So I think that was pretty important. But like I said, there was yourself and a lot of other coaches at the time that sort of little tips, I suppose, that they would sort of individually, but then as a team, the way they sort of coached was quite helpful. But I think all in all, it was definitely mum and dad that sort of pushed me and made me do the next step, I suppose.
I like how you said tried to coach. I like that.
Can't give you too much of a rap, mate.
Just telling the truth, fans.
Just the last question before we close up, because I know your time's precious. Any advice for regional players that are currently 12 to 15, or maybe a little bit older that are playing in and wanting to pursue the path that you've followed and gone down? Any advice you have for them?
I think the biggest one is always try your best, because I think a lot of it, especially for me, I was very lucky that sort of things happened quite organically, but always do your best, because you sort of, I know it's very cliche, you never know who's watching, and it's just a lot of it is right place, right time. If you tend to have a good game and the right people are watching, you never know what sort of can happen from that. But sort of, and be willing to make sacrifices. I know it's tough, and I know a lot of younger people these days sort of get painted with the same brush of being a little bit, I suppose, not work ethic, or don't have the work ethic, or don't want to make those sacrifices. So, but I know there is a lot of people that are willing to do it too. So I think if you're willing to make sacrifices and always do your best, and be ready to sort of make a change when it's the right time. I know I'm not wording this the best, but I think the biggest thing for me in my personal path was, a lot of it was right place, right time, whether it was being selected for a team or sort of playing the next game. It was always right place, right time, and a lot of it comes down to luck. But like my dad always told me, you make your own luck. So if you're doing the right things off the park, or I suppose working as hard as you can, you make your own luck, and then sort of take your chance when you get it. So I think the biggest advice is always do your best, because you never know who's watching, and then be ready to make sacrifices.
Well, before we wrap, we've asked a common question throughout it all, and it's Messi versus Ronaldo. Which side are you on?
I'm a Messi fan. I'm not sure really why. Ronaldo's obviously a freak, and he works like the way how hard he works is freakish. But I think just to watch, I prefer Messi.
Last
Good
question.
answer.
Yelps. Last question. Graham Arnold said before you come in one of the camps that you had to fix your haircut. How did you survive that?
He just loves playing it up to the media, Arnie. I said to him, and I think I've said it a few times, that he had just as bad of a mullet back in the day, and a moustache too. So, it's a bit of the kettle calling the pot black, I think. But, he was all right with it. He was just having a laugh and sort of put me on show like he likes to do. But he's all right with it, which is lucky. I didn't have to shave it to play from a country, which would have been a tough decision, but it worked out both ways.
Excellent. Well, look, we certainly appreciate your time you've been able to spend with us, and we're sure it's going to help a lot of regional players that look up to what you've done and look up to what you're doing. So for us at the Regional Football Hub, we certainly appreciate you coming on today, and we hope football starts again soon for you, and hopefully when that does happen, you'll be able to add another medal to your trophy cabinet. So thanks very much, Buster, for coming on.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ryan. All the best, mate.
Thanks, boys. Ta.